Good morning. Welcome to Sales Chatter, the logistics podcast, where we aim to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed, aka the Logistics Monk, and I know the title. It says, Let's Talk Florida. You know, last night was a brutal night in Toronto for everybody out there, but I do have my main man, the sales hacker himself. Dan, what do you think, man? Did we kind of curse the Leafs by setting this up yesterday, talking about Florida?
No, I don't believe in any of that crap. I think, you know what, it's like everything. The Leafs play out of 60 minutes, they played maybe 30, sometimes 20, sometimes 6 minutes, and we just didn't, just like with Tampa, we didn't quite pull it off. Bravosky was like on fire.
Oh my God, those last 5 minutes, man, he was just saving everything. There was nothing he couldn't save, right? So
yeah. But Kachuk, he took some hits last night, man. It was I think it was a great first and kind of halfway through the second, then the Leafs fell off.
Yes, I thought so too. I thought they played really, really well, and then they fell off. But you know what? You know what's not going to fall off, Dan? Today's episode, Data Day. There we go.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
That's why videos are high performance, brother, because it's made once and it just keeps on giving. Keeps on giving,
you know. It's like hot chocolate in Florida that we were talking about last Friday. But, you know, today is an amazing day. We've got everybody kind of coming on today, and we want to talk a little bit about Florida. So before we get into the amazing data day that we always get into, let's introduce our amazing guests who join us every Wednesday. First and foremost, Principal Analysis at DAT, Freight and Analytics. We have Dean Croke, who is coming us today live from Lake Tahoe, which you would think that maybe he's on space today, right? But I want to welcome Dean on here as well. And then we have the Bodacious Cowboy, Jeff Dickinson, join us all the way from New Jersey.
Joyzy.
Welcome to Joyzy. What's going on, guys?
There you go, man. Glad to be here. Got a lot of
So, Jeff, you had mentioned the other day when I think it was we were talking about the Rangers. So I'm sorry that that didn't work out. But you know what? We're used to it here, man. 20 plus years where it didn't work out.
Well, the Devils are still in it, right? So he can rep for both.
Well, that's why when Jeff said to go Rangers, I was like, Rangers? You're in Jersey, man. Devils.
Once a Ranger fan, always a Ranger fan.
Were you originally from New York and then went to Jersey, or were you born in Jersey?
Born in Jersey.
Born in Jersey, okay.
Yep.
And do you have the old war Jersey, New York kind of thing, like we did Montreal, or we do Montreal, Toronto, and all that kind of stuff? Is that?
Well, yeah, to a certain degree, but I'm also a New York Giants fan, you know, and you know how good they are. But, you know, once a fan, always a fan, you know, and you're going to win some and lose a lot.
I love that one. Win some and lose a lot.
It's kind of like sales.
It is like sales.
And I've never cheered so hard for the Maple Leafs, Dan, after the Panthers beat the Bruins this week. We're still smarting over that loss.
Yes.
Having like a record season and then getting hammered.
That was brutal.
Hey, we watched the Dallas game last night. How about Pavelski getting all of the goals, but then the Kraken still won? It was a phenomenal game. Playoffs are just off the charts this year.
I really think in both sports too, NBA, NHL, it's been really like LeBron James. They beat Golden State Warriors last night, so that was an amazing. We're seeing all these higher seeds beat like the lower seeds, and it's like, okay, we got to get a game. Like that's why I enjoy the World Cup, Dean, and I love cricket a lot because it's that one game, right? You get that one game playoff. You don't show up, then you don't show up, right? But Dean, tell us about where you are.
That's like sports, right? That's sports in general. You don't show up. You have some days where you're off. You know, you have some, like, if you look at the Leafs game last night, how many times we hit the post, how many times it was like missed by this much. And it's literally a game of inches or millimeters at times. You know, like golf, best golfers in the world show up to a tournament. They're not on one day out of the 4 and they're out of contention. Like,
I love a show where we can bring metric into this.
Oh yeah,
I love it. I know
we're in the
exactly
best
what you
industry
mean.
there is. Best industry
Millimeters.
there is to sell.
Love
So
Hey,
it's
it's
awesome.
just like the NCAA collegiate games, basketball
March
games.
Madness.
When the lowest ranking one beat the, or the highest ranking one beats the lowest one. A couple of times.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Awesome. So I know everybody didn't tune into sports chatter today, but let's get into the current freight market conditions and why we're talking Florida today, Dean. So let us know first and foremost. Like you mentioned last week that you're on a trip to Lake Tahoe. Tell us a little bit about that journey. What did that look like for everybody who's wishing that they can be there right now, like Dan and I?
Yeah, so we're in Lake Tahoe at 6,000 feet, and I have to say the oxygen levels are playing havoc with my brain. I'm not as sharp as I normally am. But we drove into the sun for 4 days. I don't know if you've ever done that, but 3,000 miles into the sun the entire way. When that sun gets down out in Nebraska, Nevada, Wyoming, I got sunburnt. Both my son and I got sunburnt. We were at it for 46 hours. We stopped at hotels each night for 5 or 6 hours. But it's a long country to drive. Like I've never done a cross country trip. I mean, I've driven across Australia in 43 hours with express freight on, like with a couple of stops and a lot of assistance, if you know what I mean. But doing it in a car with my son was like one of those lifelong sort of goals, just to drive across the country, but to drive over here and help him get started with a new job and buy all the furniture and help it, shop and cook and wash and do all those sorts of things. So just a great experience. But I'm off to Dallas today to speak at the Great West Casualty Conference on Friday. So I'm out of here today. So yeah, that's been my week. It's been a lot of fun. But Tahoe, they had 58 feet of snow.
Yeah.
58 feet. Most snow since 25 years. The pass from Kings Beach here in California across to Reno was closed for the first time ever. When you drive it, you can see the snow that's still there, and it's like still at 30 feet and melting. But from a transport perspective, the potholes are some of the biggest I've ever seen. And you see the car drivers from California, and there's a lot of Teslas and Beamers and Audis, and the wheels get broken because they drive into these potholes that are like 6 inches deep, and it smashes the small rims. So it's busy. It's nothing but construction trucks out there now trying to put asphalt in holes with water running through it from the runoff. Like it's a big challenge, but there's a lot of snow up here and a lot of runoff, and a lot of that's going to cause some flooding damage, of course, as they're already talking about. But good year for Californian farmers, I suspect, with all of the water that we've had here and a pretty good snowpack.
Yeah,
Good year for snowmobiling.
My nephew lives out there in Salt Lake. Yeah, he said there was like 65 feet. Crazy.
Yeah, we stopped at the Bonneville Flats, just outside of Salt Lake. Drove out on there in the 4-wheel drive Jeep, and it's just a breathtaking part of the world. But I don't know that I've ever seen more spectacular scenery than through Wyoming and Nevada. The colors out there. I mean, I could probably find some spots in Australia that are equally as picturesque. But I did a post on LinkedIn. I had a great picture of a big Peterbilt with a refrigerated trailer on coming across the Salt Lake Flats, but it had a mirror image in the salt water underneath it. So you had this image of this truck going across. Just the scenery is spectacular, but the miles are mind-numbing. So when we all talk about freight, about it's only like 1,000 miles, or it's only a 600-mile haul. I dare anyone that hasn't driven a truck to sit there and do 600 miles a day, day in, day out, and do it safely. Like a lot of truckers will say, "Oh, that's nothing. That's easy," and I will challenge that, because it's fairly hard mentally. Unless you've got a really good seat, it's hard physically. Hosting from outer space. Yes, I'm from the Bat Cave, aka the Grumpy Pete. Yeah, thank God for avatars. That's what this is called. This is called an avatar.
No, it's a background.
Virtual background. Yeah, right. See, my brain is all
avatar. You'd be like.
That's right.
Yeah, true.
You'd be a Grumpy Pete talking. You'd be the actual top of the Pete talking.
So I'm so old school. I didn't know what an avatar was. I know it was a movie. I think was it a movie?
Yes. Yeah.
2 movies. Yeah, 2 movies. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So Ryan, do you want to dive into the freight market update?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So this week, so a couple of things happening, right? So we've been talking about the market trying to find its low point or bottom. We'll show you a couple of slides in a minute about that. But I think the data point that gives me some hope that the market is improving for carriers and the capacity exodus has slowed down is some of the changes we saw in the Florida market this week. So if we start with dry van capacity in the southeast. And you might say, what's this got to do with produce season? It's got a lot to do with it. Dry van capacity in the southeast tightened last week because produce season impacts overall capacity levels, because reefer carriers that haul dry freight can switch over to higher paying produce loads, specifically where you've got high value produce that requires a new reefer and higher levels of cargo insurance. They can command a higher rate per mile. So there's this sort of exodus of capacity. Rates are up 5 cents a mile, but still at the same level. So the southeast, when we look at the southeast dry van rates, they're about the same as 2017 and 2019, which is not good news because 2019 was, of course, a horrible year. Jacksonville, though, spot rates up 11 cents a mile to $1.53. That's excluding fuel. So you'd have to add 50 cents to that to get the average. Loads to Houston were up, but still sort of at around $2.17 a mile, so reasonably good value for carriers. Atlanta, though, if you take Atlanta as sort of the bellwether for freight in the southeast, rates were up in Atlanta for the third week to $1.64. So that's going to be about $2.14, including fuel. Georgia state level rates, when you look at all of the rates in all of the state of Georgia, are about 10 cents a mile higher last week. The average was $1.74 for the state, but also identical to 2019. So we're seeing a lot of 2019 numbers pop up. And in the refrigerated market, a couple of things are happening over this 3-week period. Last week was the 75 Chrome Shop Truck Show. And you might say, what the heck has a truck show got to do with capacity? The 75 Chrome Shop Truck Show in Wildwood, Florida is one of those events where a lot of refrigerated carriers that specialize in high value commodities take time off. They take the entire week off for the truck show. And what we see is capacity tightens, but at the same time as produce volumes are increasing and peak shipping for Mother's Day starts. So that this week and next week are the 2 weeks for peak Mother's Day flowers in Miami. About 90% of our carnations and roses come into the Miami airport. The reason is most of the flowers that for Mother's Day are grown in Ecuador and Colombia. It's only a short flight. I think it's about a 3-hour flight. And you'll see dozens of jumbo jets every day bringing flowers in, and then the reefer carriers will run that north, mostly in teams. So so what we're seeing right now in Florida is a fairly typical scenario where rates will go up, volumes will go up. The volume of loads moving out of Lakeland were up 20% last week, which is a fairly big jump in produce volumes. Capacity was tight in both Lakeland and further south in Miami. So if you're looking to buy capacity this week, it'll be very expensive in the south of Florida, and it'll remain that way through the end of May, typically, as it always does. The Florida produce season typically winds down towards the end of May. So you go May, early June, it starts to get really hot, and the Florida produce season ends towards the end of May. But by then, volumes will have picked up in the southeast, where capacity is already starting to tighten. The reason this is a big deal is that this is really what starts the typical increase in spot rates for dry van and reefer in produce season. I'll use produce season in inverted commas because we're assuming that we will have a produce season. The Southeast and Florida are not the main producers, but they start the capacity tightness scenario. The bigger story is, of course, the West Coast, where produce season is delayed. We're looking for a later start, but good volumes coming out of there. That will determine how much rates move. So we still haven't got the final determinant as to whether we will have a produce season. Some experts in the market are calling for produce season to be a bust. I don't know that we can do that just yet. I mean, produce season was a bust last year, no question, but that was because of a drought in California. This year we've got too much water, but growers are growing and picking and harvesting, and truckers are hauling freight. So if we have, we're looking for May to be a real turning point in the refrigerated market in particular, driven by produce season. So the market update for this week really is that we're starting to see some early signs that there will be a produce season. How it pans out, though, we really don't know. But some of the signals early on are very positive. We're seeing the same sorts of seasonality in the southeast and Florida that we would normally see in a strong period. When I look at the produce market volumes compared to the last two freight recessions, 2016 and 2019, we're identical to 2016, and we are about 25% behind 2019, though. So but May was a quiet month in 2019. So I think what we'll see, if we can get a good hit of produce volume in this month here, we could see the market start to turn and improve. So that's sort of the market update for this week. We've got some more charts, but I'll pause there and we can sort of discuss that.
Yeah, I got a question before we kind of gets into it, right? So we're talking about Mother's Day, one of the biggest days for flowers. Do you think there's any correlation? Because capacity is going to tighten, but then when we look at the next week, it's going to be dot blitz week in the US, right? So do you see a correlation between, we're going to be looking at tightened capacity for the next, could we say even month, really? Because by the time dot blitz week is done, we're kind of like 1 week left till of May.
Right. So you've got a little bit of disruption to shipping around Memorial Day. So you've got a short shipping week, I think. I'm not sure when the day falls, but yes. So road check week is, I think it's May the 15th. Ryan, is that right? It's May 15th or 16th. So it's so that will be the week of Mother's Day, the week before Mother's Day, I think.
Yeah. Right in the heart of it.
Yeah. So normally, and again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but it's worth reiterating. Normally in bad times like this, carriers keep moving, but they keep running because they need revenue per truck week. Even though the rate per mile is down, they need to run more miles to make up their revenue targets to pay their bills. In the last year, they haven't been running more miles, which has been counterintuitive because of all of the delays that you see on either end of the supply chain. They're still having delays getting loaded and unloaded. Hard to quantify the exact number, but also having delays getting their equipment repaired because of labour shortages and parts shortages, which are still ongoing for small fleets. So I was talking to a carrier last week on the way out here, and they were adamant they had to keep running. And but the point they made, and I think we talked about this last week, they said we have very little option but to keep running when we run our teams out of the West Coast, because we've got very limited roads out of Fresno to bypass the inspection points. So when you think about it, when you come out of Bakersfield, whether you're going to run the 10, the 40, or even the 8 across to Dallas, or the 80 up through Sacramento, you've got a lot of miles, and there's very few options to not go those roads. And that's, of course, where the inspection points are. The point was they weren't evading them. They were just saying it's going to take us hours, and we were already telling our shippers expect at least an 18 to 24-hour delay in those loads to the east. So they're already doing that now. So, and you might say, well, how is that possible? Because they should have the right number of staff. Well, if you've got a limited access road, you've got a big interstate like I-40, and they decide to pull up everybody, that line of trucks gets very, very long. And
very quickly.
You might creep along at under 5 miles an hour and go off duty on your ELD. Hopefully you can do that, or just be parked for periods of time and save your hours. But it's hard to avoid them. I got pulled over once and had a level 1 inspection on a bobtail. It was 6 hours just for a truck. That was in Connecticut on I-95. So it's a pretty serious deal from a time perspective. I think that's why a lot of carriers, there's a bit of a myth that people avoid them because they don't want to get their truck inspected. That's a myth. Most people love the idea of a professional looking over their truck. And most people, there are some people out there, you see them on the roads, they are running trucks that shouldn't be on the road. There's no question about that. I see them every day. But for the vast majority of people that are professional, that do their own work on their own trucks or have a mechanic in their own shop, they love the idea of another set of eyes on their truck because they're proud of it. So that's the vast majority of people. They're not afraid to run across it. What they're worried about is the time they lose under the ELD mandate now, because you lose those hours. There's an opportunity cost. And it's not just the 4 or 5 hours. It's the fact you lose a day, like you're out of cycle, you're off cycle. You miss your delivery appointment the next day, and then you can't pick up that afternoon, and suddenly you're 2 days out of sync. and you can't get home on the weekend. That's the bigger concern that a lot of carriers have. And what we typically see during Road Trek Week is reefer carriers will take time off at about double the rate that flatbed and dry vans will. So that's why, to your point, Ryan, we could see reefer capacity tighten more so if carriers do take time off, or there's just a slowdown in the velocities through the network. Even if carriers keep working, they won't be able to run as many miles because of Road Check Week. So yes, there are some things happening in May that could tighten capacity. From a carrier's perspective, yeah.
I've got to share with you. So I explained it to a customer one day because we ran a ton of LTL out of California into the East, and it was almost 2 days later on delivery than we would normally be. And he was like, well, how could that be? And I said, well, think of it like this, like in Mississauga, and I'm sure it's like that where you are, Dean, and Jeff as well. When you leave work, if you leave work like 15 minutes late, you get caught in this like hour and a half traffic, right? And think about it coming that many miles from one coast to the next.
Right.
If you run into rush hour in one city, now you're running into morning rush hour in the next, and it just keeps adding up as you get closer
compounds.
home.
Yeah,
compounds. And I mean, I remember when we were with Transcend, when we were running Dell Computer. It was like we had a specific time we had to be out of Austin, and a specific time we had to be out of Nashville. And if we didn't meet that time to get out, we knew it was an extra 14 hours on the run. And Dell just couldn't understand it. And we actually flew our customer into Pearson Airport in Toronto at 5:00, specifically because he was from Austin, Texas, and he couldn't understand how traffic and the truck could move like a mile every hour and a half. We said, okay, no problem. So we flew him in, and literally just and we get him off the plane, we get him in a car, and our office is 5 minutes from the airport. It's like an hour to get there. By the time we get to the office, he goes, okay, point made. Point made. We didn't even have to say anything. He was like, point made. I understand completely.
So Dan, the other thing, is it's construction season. Right. So
isn't it always construction season though?
Well, it is when winter finishes. It's winter and construction. There's only two. But yeah, pothole season's now. Then we get into full on construction. But having driven 3,000 miles across this country, let me tell you, there are a lot of single lanes on double lane highways that are all you got's a single lane. And they are ripping up roads, putting down new roads one lane at a time. It was a never ending line of construction across the entire country, and you could see the trucks slowing down, doing the I'll call it the ELD crawl, where you deliberately crawl along at 4.9 miles an hour, and you don't burn your hours, you don't trigger on duty driving. So yeah, a lot of construction, a lot of delays. You've got to factor it in. So yeah, Road Check Week is going to be pretty big.
Can you say that again, Dean?
Yeah.
So they crawl at 4.5 miles.
Yeah, so with ELDs that are hooked up to your ECM, on-duty driving triggers at 5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So you'll sit in traffic, you'll see them just. So you want traffic to be either dead slow or flat to the boards. So you don't want any in between 20 mile an hour stuff. You want to if you're going to have traffic, right? Otherwise, without ELDs, we used to be able to just pull over and go to bed or have a nap or have dinner, shower, fuel, and then go back out when traffic's slowed down. So, but you can't do that now if you've got to keep rolling, because that 14-hour clock is sort of going to work against you at some point, where at the 14th hour from when you started driving, started work, you can no longer drive.
Right.
So it's a cumulative problem. At least if you go off duty under 5 miles an hour, you can save some of your 60 hours available for the week. So there's some times when you can use special circumstances and personal conveyance to save that time, but you're not talking about a lot of time in the big scheme of the week, because you could lose more time sitting on a shipper's dock or waiting in a fuel island or traffic. So.
And going 5 miles an hour is pretty painful.
Yeah. I think Dave O'Brien's said point made. Does he want us to move on? I can't figure out what he means. Point made. He's saying shut up and get going. Is that what that is?
No, I don't think so, man. We got good people here. I don't know about DATIQ Live, Dean. Our audience, they're pretty easy on us. You know,
Are they?
they're not bashing us.
Oof. Hey, how brutal are they on us?
They
Oh, the
are
comments, they are insane. There's like some trolls out there that really work us over.
Yeah, there's one specifically that I was watching with both Jeff. But Jeff, I'd love to get your kind of thoughts, like based on your kind of history of kind of working, hey, through May, the conversations that you're having with your customers, specifically for a month like this with Memorial Day, we got Mother's Day, we've got the Blitz Week as well.
Yeah, and I follow Dean and that, and I use a lot of their graphs, and I relay that to my customers as well. And when you have a bounce from 3 cents to 4 cents on the reefer, and then you have a bounce of 1 cent from 9 to 10 cents. I mean, that's not a big moving point. Are we still in the bottom? Yeah, we're still in the bottom. And I've been having some chats with Jason Miller, becoming some friends, and I'll just read this. And I think it's so valid, and I'd love to get Dean's point of view on this. He basically said that my biggest concern is that if we look at the freight recessions before 2000, 2003, 07, 09, 15, 16, and 19, we recovered from each of these due to an exogenous demand shock. The 2004, 2006 housing boom, the 2010, 2014 fracking boom, the 2017-18 ELD tax cut, hurricane recovery boom, and the 20 and 21 consumer spending boom. I don't see any comparable boom coming. While restoring will likely help freight volumes, this will be a much slower process with far more incremental volume. So he doesn't see it happening. And that's
from a demand perspective. Yeah,
from the demand. And then, I went on to Trading Economics and I looked at information there. And in February, imports were down $4.8 billion and transport was up 0.8 billion. That's not good numbers, guys. I mean, that's telling a story that's not worth telling, but it is. If you really look at it. The point is that off of the Trading Economics site, they showed a graph that was horrific. That they don't see a recovery until at least March 2024, if the path follows that. So, I mean, there's just there's going to be more conversations about this and trending analysis and where we go from here. We have to see a big turnaround between now and Memorial Day, and even moving into the 4th of July and past that into Labor Day, going into peak. I don't know if it's going to happen.
I agree with Jason Miller on this. It's this market cycle in trucking won't be driven by a change in demand because of all the reasons you just stated. The rates will change because of a change in supply, and the supply is still leaving the industry. So when the market, that's why we think it's bottoming out now. And worst case scenario is that we don't see a bump in rates because of produce season. And we see what we saw in 2019, which was a non-existent produce season impact, because you had too much capacity. And then we see this slow decline, maybe flat to a slow decline in spot rates. That would be the worst possible scenario. So maybe that's a good time to throw up the previous charts, Ryan, all those first two charts we've got, where I went back and looked at how the market's turned. This is the chart for dry van, I think. And what you can see here is that at the bottom, both markets, this is the blue line is, and I can't see the number, I think the blue line is 2019, the grey line is 2016. And you can see that the red line is, or the purple line, pink line is 2023. And you can see how they've followed down towards this sort of low point in May and then pick up towards produce season. You can see 2019 was relatively flat for the best part of the year until you get into the Christmas holiday season. A little bit of a bump in 2016 also.
Right.
But both those markets, and if we go to the next chart, these are the moving averages for 3-day rates that kind of give us a feel for where the rates are going. If you look at the next chart, we go back a little bit further, and you can see that both of the markets turned on the 1st of May in 2016 at $1.35, on the 1st of May at 1st of May 2019 at $1.47. We're at $1.62 this week, or the start of this week. And so it was interesting that May was the turning point in both of those two freight recessionary periods, where capacity we were certainly in an oversupplied capacity relative to demand. So we are still seeing capacity exit the industry. We're still seeing around 1,700 carriers, more carriers leave than come in, based on our data for April. So we're still seeing the net of new carriers and carriers exiting the industry. It's still negative, so we're still losing capacity,
Right.
but at a slowing rate. So to the extent so this market, the rate cycle will turn based on the shift in capacity relative to demand, which by all accounts is flat to slightly down compared to this time last year. And I think Jason Miller's exactly right. And he's been saying this for a few months now, is that, absent a housing recovery, which drives a lot of flatbed and dry van freight, he doesn't see the demand trigger. I think he's absolutely right, barring some sort of a catastrophic event. So, Ken Adamo said on our show 2 weeks ago that the bottom in rates will be determined by the shifting capacity relative to demand. And we're still seeing long-haul interstate capacity exit. Diesel's down to just over $4 a gallon, was down about 4.9 cents this week, I think. To some extent, that gives carriers more breathing room because it lowers their operating costs even further.
What is it now?
I think it's 401. I'd have to quickly look at...
No, I'm saying as a percent.
I'd have to pull that up. I have to, if you give me a second.
$4, they would be what? 17-18% at $4.
No,
if we look at what we talked about last time,
it's more than that.
Yeah, it's got to be in the 30s.
Give me a second here. It's 35%. Yeah. Still 35%. Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's still high.
But that's crushing, Dean. I mean, when you look at that, I mean, it's not sustainable. I mean, you have to be below 25% in order to make a profit on that, and the rates are still down low. The fuel is up high. These guys are getting squeezed, like unbelievable, but they still have to move freight, at a loss. A lot of these guys, they're just hanging on by, a thread.
Yeah. So it's a good point. Guys, here's one thing that I think that we all need to make sure that everybody watching keeps in perspective. A lot of this conversation is from spot market. A lot of this conversation is not from contract rates. A lot of this conversation, like, there are companies out there that are booming right now with freight and have a ton of freight and pay good money for their freight. So as much as we're seeing, I think we've all been in this industry long enough to see these roller coaster rides consistently, right? And just for all you new freight reps out there, this isn't a like holy shit run for the hills, get a new career. It's just understanding that this is more of a spot market talk. So if you're working in the spot market, that's where you're subject to a lot of these fluctuations, and that's where you're going to get beat out on price by the next broker who chops rates in half, or the next carrier does it. Like, there's always customers with product they manufacture, like pharmaceuticals, right? Pharmaceuticals are never usually impacted by a lot of this bottom dollar rates because they need high quality people, professionals to get their stuff done. Is it going to take longer, like Dean talked about? Yes, to get to your destination, right? But I think, Dean, the market goes through these cycles for a cleansing. I really do. I think it's a cleansing.
Oh, yeah. But something on that, too, is that the spot market, when it comes down, it has that draw effect on the contract, and it pulls those contracts down as well. And the thing is, for how long. But when you look at all Dean's graphs and you listen to Jason Miller as well, I mean, it doesn't paint a really good picture. It's like, how long are they going to be that way? The spot, the contract rates. I see a lot of contract rates out there on lots of lanes that have that sucking effect. They're getting pulled in.
I think this is where pivoting comes in, right? As a carrier, and I'll share with you why. I have a friend of mine who owns, he's probably up to 165 trucks now. I mean, so like from a U.S. perspective, pretty small company, but from a Canadian perspective, it's a fairly large company.
Nice size.
When in 2019, when things got really kind of backwards, I'll say, well, now it's kind of like we're using 2019 as a year to like base things off of. What he did is he switched. He took a lot of his drivers. He laid a few off, and he switched and started to move his freight on the spot market to save him the sanity of his trucks, and started to actually make money instead of losing money in his own trucks. So he looked at him and his company looked at, where is our good freight paying, and then this is where we would lose money coming home. So those lanes, they started brokering out to people. They would do the local P&D and broker it out to people, and then they would just not worry about the truck coming home. So it's that pivoting, right? It's that understanding your markets, and all of you that move freight from A to B, that's your market that you need to understand, and pivoting inside of that market to make things work for you, right? And so he had, out of the 165, I think he had close to 60 to 70 trucks sitting. But the money they were making on the brokerage end paid for the trucks hands over fist, right? And I don't think a lot of companies would do that. Like if you talk to a 100 truck trucking company and say, park 33% of your fleet, I think they'd be like, are you crazy? Like that's going to cost an insane amount of money. So I think it's I think it's all kind of that, what's the freight you're moving? How often do you have to pivot? And I think those two, and maybe you guys can add something else inside of that conversation where people need to start thinking about, like, if you're a broker and you're losing clients left, right, and center, what's the freight you're moving? Is it that bottom dollar commodity which people can switch very quickly, or are you better to focus, say, a longer close on long-term customers? You guys know what I'm saying? You understand?
Yeah.
So this is probably a good opportunity to remind people that the reason we talk about spot rates is they lead contract rates by 4 to 6 months. That has been shortening though. So I will say that because we've been watching, we thought spot rates would have bottomed out sooner. If they bottom out in May, then you're looking at October, November before contract rates start to come back up again. That's why you look at spot rates and the number of carriers that are coming and going. Active rates in routing guides are flat to slightly down, but new rates coming in from RFPs in dry van are down 13% in April. So they're coming. So the carriers are negotiating contract rates on, the 85% of the freight that moves on contract. They're negotiating them down. So there is that pull effect that Jeff talked about. So as spot rates come down, they'll drag contract rates down. So we should talk about, I guess, in the context of spot rates on the market, we also should use the contract rates change in context, because for those that are new to the show, the two do work together, albeit on a lag. So I just said, Ryan, a chart to give you a sense of where carriers are at, to Jeff's earlier point that they are struggling. This is what I published today in my blog at dat.com/market update. Time for shameless plugs. This is the chart.
Right.
This is, so the blue line is the all-in.
Super slick, Dean. Super slick. That was
got to get
like,
it in there.
seamless, man.
I got to hit before you hit the buzzer on me and shut me down.
Yeah.
So the blue line is the dry van rate from 2019 through to today. The green line is the operating cost adjusted for inflation. So you can see it's been about $1.60, got up to just over $2 a mile this time a year ago. It's come down to $1.78. The red line is the gross profit per mile. So this is a 100,000 mile a year truck. Error bars are set at 10 cents. And so gross profit is after wages, fuel, tires, insurance, not taxes, subscriptions, tolls, accommodation, telephones. It's everything it costs to run a truck down the road with a driver. And you can see that for most of 2019, which was a horrible year in record bankruptcies, the average was -2 cents a mile across the year. Slow grind. Forced a lot of carriers out, even big carriers. At the moment, we're sitting at +3. So we're not at 2019 levels of profitability yet, but perilously close if rates keep dropping. And that's we're coming off. Look at that period above the green line in the center, the most profitable period in trucking history, I would argue. That gave carriers a lot more runway. They paid off a lot of debt. So it's different to 2019, and that's why carriers are hanging on longer. But they are barely getting by, to Jeff's point. I said last week on our show, they're a breakdown away from going out of business because at 3 cents a mile profit on 100,000 miles, that's $3,000 profit. You probably need 30 grand for an in-frame rebuild on an engine. Tires are $600 a hit. You're going to spend 5 grand on drive tires. So this is not enough profit for carriers to be profitable and survive long term. So they're getting by, but this is why May and produce season and all of these things we've been talking about are so important for carriers, because if we don't see a produce season and that blue line keeps coming down, the costs won't change a lot because diesel is probably going to sit at around $4 a gallon based on the EIA forecast. So what happens is that red line starts to drop below zero, and then we're into a 2019 scenario, which this sort of puts into context everything we've been talking about today, because this is the spot market and it will drive the contract market scenario later in the year when capacity starts to tighten. Because if we get that red line below break even at zero, then you start to see capacity exit faster. Then the market turns because you'll have less capacity relative to demand.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dean, if the FSC happens to go up, we're talking a whole different ballgame. I mean, if it goes up to 450 or something like that, I mean, that's going to go quickly down that break even.
Yeah, it'll force a lot of carriers that are on the margins out of the business. The JD Power used truck auction data from April is perilously close to the 1,200 trucks sold at auction in June of 2019. Right, so there's a lot of high mileage trucks. People are selling off a lot of excess capacity. Auctions are generally the first place you go to. It's a quick sale. So that I've been watching that number. Anybody can go to JD Power and download Chris Viss's monthly blog post where he's got the chart that shows the class 3 to 8 auctions, the value, the sale of used trucks, and the number. There's a great chart in there that shows the inventory at auction, and that to me
the
is
value of the used truck still so extremely.
It's coming down. No, it's coming down. Well, high relative to previous highs. It's higher, but it has come down substantially. And again, ACT Research put out some great publications on this. So that's why we talk about this as a perilous time for carriers and capacity, because if all of those scenarios pan out, the negative side, then the market cycle turns quicker, as in rates start to go up because capacity leaves faster. That's why you've got to look at spot rates, the spot market. Even though it's only 15% of loads moved, it's an early indicator of where the market is going, because trucking in general is a good barometer of where the economy is going, because we haul things that people buy and build, and that's how it all comes
We're the
together.
first one to go down and the first one to come up when the economy drops and turns. And, Dean, it's funny because I can remember a year ago us talking about, be careful, don't go out and buy equipment that's overpriced, because when things turn, you're going to be left with these huge payments and not enough money to pay them. And part of me says, 2018, when everything was going haywire in the industry, so much equipment was bought, which led to the roller coaster of 2019. And I think carriers did it again. And over, my neighbor drives, and he owns his own truck, and he knows he spent way too much on his truck, too much, and he was able to sign with a company where his fees are covered, but he's even said, they're cutting one trip a week, and it's cutting it close. And my first question was, well, why did you? Oh man, it was such a good market. I said, I know, but it's
unprecedented.
like, you do know it was doing this to do this, right? And he says, yeah, I know. I was just hoping it would be another 2 years and I would be set, right?
Wow.
Like, and I'm thinking, wow, man, it was already 3
We
years.
all did.
And now
Yeah,
you
we all
want-
did.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
the 5-year swings. I'm not sure that COVID swing was going to be 5 years, but whatever. But it's
if only some bloke could have told them 18 months ago that this had happened. If only.
If only,
What the heck?
only right up there in the left corner.
You should have told him to cancel his trip to Bora Bora, that $20,000 vacation.
I've been like a crack record on this stuff. God, it was just,
but
so another
frustrating for you sometimes, Dean.
Well,
where it's
it is because I hate seeing carriers suffer. I hate seeing them get into this pit of despair on social media, complaining about everything and it all being entirely possible. I mean, on some senses, the experienced, veteran, profitable carriers are complaining about the carrier that's new and takes the load for the cheapest possible rate. That's always been the case. But a lot of new carriers made the same mistake of not understanding their operating costs, buying used trucks that were too expensive. Now have got high maintenance costs and rates have dropped, and they really don't know how to negotiate the market, because in a strong market, you could name your price. Today, you've got to look hard. You've got to search hard, pick the right lanes, be in the right markets at the right time. So one other data point before we sort of get to the end, guys, I wanted to share with you that's, again, a free data set is air cargo data. So air cargo, so if you're thinking about global indicators or just indicators in general of freight, like we talked about the spot market being a leading indicator of the contract market and the broader economy, air cargo is the most expensive. So it's the first one to get dropped when the market tightens. So remember when there was the tariff impact on, I think it was January 2019, that the tariff impact from the Trump administration came in, massive pull forward of freight. People couldn't find space on a vessel from Asia to bring their freight in ahead of the tariff increase. Air cargo rates went through the roof from Asia to the West Coast. During the pandemic, we had people couldn't fly passengers, so they're pulling passenger seats out, loading wide-body jets with air cargo. So fast forward to today, air cargo volumes, according to World ACD, it's a small company in Amsterdam, World ACD, publish a report every month. Air cargo volumes are down 18% from in quarter one compared to quarter one last year. So volumes have dropped dramatically, yields have dropped. You're seeing a lot of excess capacity in the air freighter business, just like you're seeing excess capacity in trucking. So I watch, if I'm looking for a global indicator or even a North American indicator of the broader economy, air cargo is one that I watch closely, just like I watch the Association of American Railroads weekly report on intermodal tonnage and rail and units moved, because intermodal is a competitor. But the other data point from the American Association of Railroads is chemicals. Chemical carloads. Chemicals are used in every manufacturing process. Bar a few. So if you watch the change in chemical carloads week to week, year over year, the whole AAR weekly report had volumes up last week. So, and it's been up for a couple of weeks. If you follow Larry Gross on LinkedIn, he's one of the experts on the intermodal space. Volumes are still down about 10% in the intermodal space year over year, but they're improving. And I think Larry said for the last 3 weeks. So again, these are all things you've got to watch. I know there's a lot of sort of plates you're spinning here, to use that circus analogy, but they all paint a picture. And you need to take in, they're all part of a puzzle, right? No one piece tells you, the complete picture, but if you put it all together, all of those pieces sort of start to build a really neat picture of the market.
Yeah, and another magazine that you should look into is right here. Railway Age, another one which I read a lot on. But yeah, those two are really good indicators as well. Absolutely.
You still get paper copies?
I do. I just prefer them because when I'm doing my stuff, I just like to read. So
me too. Me too. I love the paper. I went and bought the newspaper. I got the paper newspaper here on Sunday morning.
I'm the opposite, guys. I'm a digital guy. I'm a digital guy, man. Maybe it's the difference in ages, right? Like from there, I do everything. I do everything digital. If I can't,
old school or go home.
Stay home, Jeff. That's why you're at home, Jeff. You know?
This is Celebrity Squares, old school versus
Yeah,
new
I
school.
love it. Yeah, you guys are teaming up on me. I love the digital stuff. So, no, Dean, there was a lot of data here, and we can't thank you enough for always coming with us, even when you're on vacation, things like that. Can you tell everybody about like the blog, the show as well, and anything up that you got coming up?
Yeah, so that chart that we showed you a minute ago on owner-operator viability, I put together like a 600-word blog post. It was published last night at dat.com/market update. Go to the blog post. It's a good read. We publish all of the charts on our show every week. So all of the charts, all of the spot rates for the last 5 years that we've sort of been talking about are all there. They're all published. You can download them. It's all free. So that's a good place to sort of, if you need information to share in a marketing meeting or a management meeting, and you understand the market, there's some good charts. I've had 5 people write to me yesterday saying, where can I get the charts from the show yesterday? We have a number of shippers that use my weekly report. They pull out the reefer year-over-year spot rate trends, load to truck ratio, and they include that in their management weekly report. So there's some good data in there. I don't mean to just flog a dead horse here. That's probably a terrible analogy these days, but promoting my own show and content.
No, that's what we're here, man. It's you do whatever you got to do. Yeah, keep promoting.
You should hear some of the things I say to Ryan off air. He's like, dude, don't get us.
See, I'm always worried the Australian truck driver comes back. It's like
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. We can always blame it on the accent, It's always like I'll just give the audience a little bit on you, Dean, as well. It's like I'm the guy when I was on with Jeff before Dan came back on. I was like, Jeff, don't get us canceled. And now that I'm back on with Dan, I'm like, Dan, please do not get us canceled, man. It's like a canceled. So you've got the blog coming out, Dat IQ Live. Tell everybody about that, how they can get it.
Yeah, so we're on every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Live. You can catch us on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube at DAT Freight and Analytics, and you'll get the alert about half an hour before the show. It's
no friggin' trolls.
No trolls. Trolls are banned.
No trolls.
You'll be cancelled if you troll us. Gosh, I spend a lot of time cancelling people on LinkedIn, and there's some people out there that have got way too much to say about nothing. Like just
that's what we get. Well, that's the thing about having an opinion, So everybody catch Dat IQ Live every Tuesday morning. It's a great show. Jeff and I were on the last consecutive weeks, and it was a great time to be with them. So if you found value in this, please like, comment, share, subscribe to our growing channel, which we definitely love. We'll hit the replay back again at 2 p.m. on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And like I said, always share it with a friend, share it with a neighbor, share it with your spouse, share it with the Amazon driver who's bringing your packages today in care of Lake Tahoe, in care of Dean. So with that being said, Dano, give us 2 quick points and take us home, my man.
Take the data. Talk to your customers about it. Show them if any of this data that you get on DAT or Jason Miller, anywhere that has real data that tells you what the market is actually doing, share it with your customer. But please, point number 2, understand it first. Don't just go in thinking you're some, understand it.
That's the biggest takeaway from that whole thing.
Huge. Understand it. Yeah. Exactly. And you know what? Just help your customer understand what's happening, because the person that has the information and can help the customer foresee things is the resource that they're going to want to use long term.
Boom. There we go. So we'll see everybody tomorrow for Personal Development Day, which we had a great time. And thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Dean. And Dan, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Yeah.